How you doing, everyone? My name is Sonny Koh. I've been coming to this meetup from the beginning. This is my third time speaking. I'm trying to speak like once a year. Just I think it's a really good thing for me. Last year I did September, so this year I'm doing October. Uh, that's right. So I put a lot of thought into this talk tonight. It's divided into three sections. It's gonna be kind of long. I hope I don't come off as being verbose or long-winded. Uh, the first part, I'm going to show examples where I think it's like people misuse 3D just because they think it's cool. And then the second part, I'm going to do a demo of the transform attributes of CSS3. You could do a lot of really cool 3D kind of stuff in CSS, but I think a lot of stuff is misunderstood. And then the third part, I'm going to do a demo of Three.JS. Three.JS is a JavaScript framework that allows you to manipulate WebGL environments. WebGL is like the web version of OpenGL, which has been like the standard for real-time rendering. It's mostly used for like real-time of like first-person gaming, but like Google Maps use WebGL as well too. So let's begin. Okay. Um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my history. I've been working on the web, developing stuff for the web for like 20 years, more than 20 years now. And when I first started my career, I was working for a startup in Los Angeles, and we were building this website to allow users to shop and compare auto insurance. So today, everybody that buys or compares auto insurance buys it online. It's not a big deal. Like 20 years ago, buying insurance online was a new thing. Like no one did it. People went to their neighborhood insurance broker that was next to the Blockbuster, you know. All right. So what we built was really cool. We was built in Flash. If you guys remember what Flash was, um, it was like a dashboard of a car with a steering wheel, and you had to drive this car through the beautiful sceneries of America. And along the way, you'd have these 3D billboards coming at you, and these billboards had like um, different rates and compare. You would click on them, and that's how you continue through the road. So it took, if you did a happy path, it took 6.5 minutes to get through the entire process. And I gotta tell you, I mean, back then we hacked this thing together. It was really beautiful. It was two Flash components on two different layers. HTML used to have this thing called a layer tag. So like the the two components would send up signals up to JavaScript and then send down messages down to the other component and vice versa. So I tell people we were building like components with props like 20 years ago before any of this stuff happened. So everybody was happy about it. Like it looked incredible. The investors were really happy with it. Um, Macromedia that owned Flash at the time, they sent down a representative because they wanted to promote us, and we were all like feeling really great about what we created. And then we had an alpha, and we hired a focus group, and we put it in front of the focus group. So the focus group, first off, everyone said the same thing. They all said first it looked amazing, and then after that it was the navigation was very difficult. They didn't know what parts of the dashboard were clickable. It was confusing to get through the different paths. It was impossible to go back. They didn't know how to navigate the entire thing. It took too long to get to the checkout. And the thing that pissed off everybody universally was when people got stuck or made a mistake, they would click on the back button on the browser, and then you would just lose all your work and just start the whole program over again. So this really had a real, I mean, the Flash version of this product never launched. We never got to like a beta version, but it really had a direct effect on me because this was the first time I just had the realization like you can't design stuff for yourself. You have to design stuff that people want. And like, the idea of UX or user experience, it wasn't coined yet. So I call this like designing for self gratification. And that's the term I used all the time. Um, guy, Don Norman, he's the guy who first coined the term UX or user experience. He was a he was a professor at MIT, and he and his partner Jacob Nielsen started like the Nielsen Norman Group. They were like the first guys that like focused on usability and UX and accessibility, and not just websites, just making products that people wanted and were user friendly. Um, his partner Jacob Nielsen, by the way, he wrote an op-ed piece a long time ago that was in a business journal that, and the title of his op-ed was called 99.9% of all Flash sites are crap. And a lot of people think like who's the Apple guy? So yeah, people think Steve Jobs was the guy who killed Flash, but really, guy Jacob Nielsen was the first guy to really advocate just get rid of Flash and stuff. Jobs helped a lot. Um, so if this was like a pitch meeting, and I was saying like I get this idea to build a website where you drive a car through America and it takes 6.5 minutes to get to the checkout page, I think you guys would be like, that's dumb. Like that's the dumbest thing you could ever think of, right? But I think like user experience is you see it in hindsight because it's very hard to see until you experience it. But I'll show you like this some examples I found with like what I think is just like bad use of 3D. First thing I'm gonna show is this was launched like really like 6 years ago. Gotta go through the commercials. I remember this when it was launched. It was on the homepage of IKEA, and this idea was that you can design a room online using their like online app and furnish it with IKEA products. And at any time you can see the entire page, entire room in 3D. And you could anytime you could spin the room and see how everything looked and add accessories to it. It worked really well. I remember this because it didn't lag at all. It had nice movement. It's just there's no purpose for this. Like people don't buy furniture like this. Like people go to a store, they they buy a couch, bring it home, and stick it on a wall, and look back, see how it looks, and then they don't like it, they put it on another wall. And this app was the idea was that the room would be the checkout page, and then everything you put in this room would go to checkout. But that's just not how people shop for like an entire room. But this was in like a Forrester report about how someone from like a very high up level, probably at IKEA, probably like a chief technical officer, chief marketing officer, just decided like I'm gonna force this through. Like I want this thing to happen. And was a pro I mean, I can imagine how much dev and money it took to build this out, and it just it went to die on YouTube basically. I'm sorry. Yeah, they still use little parts of it too, for like doing the walls and stuff like that, but they got rid of the whole entire room thing. I still don't think a lot of people use the. Mhm. You use it? Maybe some people use it. So the next three I'm going to show is I get this news feed of like cool, innovative web design, web development kind of stuff. And I got this one feed one time of like top 10 great 3D portfolio websites. And I was going through them and I just thought like they were all just self-gratuitous and just just really bad use of 3D. So I just pulled up three of them. So, like this first guy, is that yours? No, okay. So I don't know what this guy is doing. It's just it's nothing is clickable. Yeah, it's he's actually using Three.JS to do this, but there's nothing clickable. It doesn't tell me anything about the guy. And this thing that keeps wrapping around, it just becomes annoying after a while. Like you can't see through it. These guys are the only things that are clickable on it. He just decided like he figured out how to do this loop and just decided like I'm gonna force this on there no matter what.
Honestly, like a bad version of cover.
Overflow. So the next guy, this guy takes a while to load. You wait for it to load just to get this 3D animation in the front, and then you get this page that it's super hard to. There's nothing clickable. It just you can't even make it stop. It just the only thing clickable on this is the contact page, and then this takes you to what you probably need to learn about this guy. But this third guy, he's kind of famous actually. Mm, this guy, it's really hard to drive because it's the the keys are the opposite of because you got to picture yourself in the car, so it's opposite of what you know. Where is it?
His name is PR Simon.
Bruno Simon. So I kind of like you have to get through this to get something clickable, but um, I kind of feel like this guy actually created something that's valuable because his audience is not the public. Like this guy does Three.JS and Three.JS only, and he teaches class on Three.JS. So his audience is someone that's can he's trying to impress someone with this kind of what you could do with Three.JS. So the next example I want to show is I used to know this guy in LA. He's like Elon Musk. He's just a super brainiac guy. He's just he's his brain thinks differently than everyone else's. And he started a bunch of companies and exited a bunch of companies, and he has a bunch of patents that he licenses out. And so this is one of the technologies he came up with that it blew me away when I first saw it. But the thing is, like, I don't see how that adds value to the product. Like, it's not going to make you want to buy that product more. It doesn't add like any more knowledge to the product that you're buying. Like,
Seeing how like it'll fit on your desk and stuff.
on your desk.
Will it fit on my desk? Will it fit in my?
Okay.
I'm just usually seeing that kind of AR stuff for and kind of like.
A lot of development, I would think, to just get that to like one product where you get some kind of ROI on it. So the next one, I wasn't sure if I was going to show it. Last year we were moving when we were selling the house. We had like realtors come in. When the realtors came in, they brought these big like uh, Canon cameras and placed them around the house, and they made this like 3D kind of thing that I loved that this thing is still online because I missed this house and I just feel like I could just go visit my old house whenever I want to, you know. But what I realized is that when I was looking for a new house online and they had this option, I'd never use it just because I just don't want to be bothered. I'm looking at 100 different houses, you know. I just want to click through the photos and go to the next one. So that's part one. So the next part is when we show like with transform. Transform attributes been around for CSS for a long time as part of 3SS CSS3. But I think just until recently, people figured out all kinds of crazy stuff you could do with it. So I made a CodePen account. It's CodePen.io /NWJ. Hey, this guy's cheating, man. So the first thing I want to show is so this is a 3D composition. It doesn't look like a 3D composition, right? It just it just looks like a flat box. So I want to show this is the entire HTML. It's just an outer. I have a box. I have an inner, and I have an H1 with the word hello in it. So on the box, I set a transform with a rotate Y of 0 degrees and a rotate X of 0 degrees. When you click on it, Chrome offers this little dial. So now you could see that it is like a 3D composition. I'm sorry. So there's a point. Sorry. There's a point where it should all become invisible because it's completely at 90 degrees. So this is kind of like an important point for something I'm going to show a little later on. Same with the Y, the X. So this is just CSS. You can manipulate the CSS any way you want with JavaScript, or you could do all kinds of hover effects. So I defined a second class already. So if you want to do something funky with just a hover, you could do something like that. So when you do transform rotate, and you don't define uh, the transform origin, the default is center. But you can change the transform origin on the left. So okay. So now that I changed that to transform the left and top, if I rotate it, it's gonna rotate from the left, and then from the top, it's gonna rotate from the top. And you could switch that to right bottom or whatever you want. So one last thing on this. If you ever see this syntax that translate 3D, and it has these three properties, this is just shorthand for translate X, translate Y, and translate Z. Like, I don't know how many times I've shown that to people, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that what translate 3D did. That's all it is. Let me get, so it's kind of cool that you can manipulate the X and Y, but like, what can you do with it in like a real world scenario with a real use case? Well, I don't know if you guys have like a Linktree account, but when I first saw this, I thought it was so cool. It's just, it has this animation thing that just lazy loads in, and it loads according to the position of your mouse. And then if you click it, it just goes to the next animation in the trail. Like, it doesn't have any direct functionality, but I just thought it was such a cool effect that I was like, I want to see if I can reproduce that. So this is my version. I had a lot of fun with this. But I learned something from doing this too. So first I'm going to show you how I'm doing this. I have a grid that's on top of everything that set the opacity to 0. And I'm doing the hover over the grid. So this is the grid. I put colors in there just so you guys see what I'm doing. So on page load, I figure out where this point is. And then wherever the mouse moves away from that point, I find the X and Y. And I just pass that in as just a string. And then if you leave it, it just snaps right back. So I learned something from doing this. So when I first did it, I used the mouse over um, mouse handler, event handler. And what I found out is that mouse over triggers the second that you stop moving the mouse. So the animation was always like, seemed like it was always trying to catch up to your mouse movement. It felt jerky. And then I didn't know this guy existed. There's this event called mouse move, and it's firing constantly wherever you're moving the mouse. I'm sure it's burning a lot of memory doing that. But you guys can look at the code, but basically all I'm doing is I'm just calling this function called set transform with an XY. And then this transform I just have the card has a style with a transform, and this string gets written out, and that's what's controlling the entire animation. So once you kind of understand what like the rotate X and Y, you can do a lot of like crazy things. I don't know if you guys know who Amit Chin is. He, in my opinion, he's like the GOAT when it comes to like CSS. He's this Israeli guy. He's not really a developer. He's not really a designer. He just does these incredible things with CSS. So the first time I saw this, I was like, how's that even possible? Because there's nothing in the HTML. It's just blank. And then when I looked at it and I looked at his code, I was like, it's not that technically difficult. It's just very clever. So this is in SAS, but like both SAS and less have a for loops built into them. If you use Post CSS, you can get like a plugin to do for loops. But what he does is he just grabs each one of these LIs and then he creates three variables. One's the left, one's the color, and one's the angle. And he passes them up to, so the LI takes in an angle and a width. And then each one of the LIs has a before that writes out the entire script. And since the LIs have an overflow that just captures like one little section, you only see that section for that particular area. So just to let you wrap your head around what's happening, I'll turn off the overflow. So if you turn off the overflow, you get this. So it's really clever, like how he thought this through. And he does some really amazing things, like things I have no idea how this works. But once again, I was like, I want to find out, I want to figure out how this carousel thing works. So I just like I forced myself to like create a carousel without looking at anyone else's code. So this is my carousel, and this is just a UL with the LI. The first thing you got to know is like forget what a UL and LI is used for. Just it could be div. Like I'm stripping of everything that the CSS is intended for. So the UL is basically this powwow thing, and each one of these LIs are the guys that uh, wrapped around it. Just to give you an idea of how the so this translates V is the distance from each LI to the mother UL. And this is just an arbitrary number that I came up with that I thought looked good. But if I change that to 150, it'll just shrink in. So and this kind of looks cool in its own way too, because the arms kind of alternate really cool. And the section it's not even needed. I just used the section as a vehicle to tilt it a little bit so you could see the bottom when it gets to the other section. So if I remove the section, it would just become flat. I like the section there. And what I realized is like if I put on the section, like if I rotate, uh, it kind of looks like one of those carnival rides, I thought. So in the beginning, when I did this on my own, I did LI 9 child 1 and NI 9 child 2 all the way down to 8 of them. And then later, so I'm just saying this wasn't my original idea. I just found this afterwards. Some guy on YouTube showed like you can add this variable style and then use that to calculate the rotation. And this calc rotation, this is pure CSS. This is not using like Sass or less. This is built into regular CSS. Say that again? Mhm. Yeah, it's a CSS variable. So this, you can, maybe I'm not understanding your question. This I can be anything. So I could be like P and make them all P's if I want to. But
that one is broken up. So it is actually, okay, no, it's really, I just learned some shit.
so anything with a variable with the CSS has to start with a dash dash. Okay. Neither did I actually. Yeah, I didn't know this worked either. Yeah, I was like, how does that work? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's he's looking at them right now, actually. So the other thing I see that people use a lot is this folding effect that I see, where like we're talking about the phone folding. Um, I don't know if you guys ever used Airbnb. Most of my career was spent working on like hotel management, hotel booking sites, and in my opinion, like Airbnb website is the most well designed, most well UX. Is I just think it's just really well done. They're always constantly adding new features that work really well. So I want to show so I go to Berkeley, California. So so Airbnb added this feature where if you're like if you want to show a guest, um, they made these little books, and these books are made with divs. It's not a image. It's just like a bunch of divs with a photo inside. And then when you hover over it, the book kind of like jars open a little bit. And then if you click on the book, the it just kind of opens up really nicely. Like you don't think about it. The physics looks believable. Like you actually think it's opening up. I just thought it was a great effect. So I want to see what I can do with that folding effect. So sticking with the wrestling theme, this is my thing. I was a kid. I was really into watching those wrestling. There was a there was like one year when WWF became WWE because the WWF.com was taken by the World Wildlife Federation. So I really try to do this. I tried to do it in pure CSS, and I wasn't able to do it. So I have like, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I have a one line of JavaScript, and all this does is like after 1.5 seconds, it just toggles back front and back on that guy. So last thing, I know this is a JavaScript meetup, so I got to show at least one JavaScript app, right?
Yeah.
So I built this in Vue 3. I know you guys are mostly React people. Are you? Don't like you? Okay. So this is it's just an app with two components. And the app, it just I'm grabbing the time from a regular JavaScript data object, and I'm just chopping it up into 6 digits, and I pass that into the clock component. And on the clock component, I have a watcher, and on the watcher, I pass in the old value and the new value for each one of the digits, and then that gets passed down to the digit, and then the digit component. Each one of the digit components has a class called card, and I'm getting the second class in this function. And this function, it just compares the old digit to the new digit. So if they're not the same, I I return a animation class. Otherwise, it's just returning an empty string. So when I first did this, I was like, okay, this is gonna take me a few hours, and I'll knock it out. And this actually took me a few days. Just one things I found is that like this guy is flipping all the time. So the the last digit after the first flip, it would never change because it just always stay the same class on the flip. And the flip only knows that it's supposed to flip one time. So the way I got around that was that on the old number that gets in, I say like if it's an even number, I'm gonna return an animate even, and if it's an odd number, I'm gonna return an animate odd. So I think this is like a good project, like an intermediate project. If you guys want to create something where in a real use case, this thing really made you think of like how like transform can fit in with a real use case because you have to think of like timing and everything like that. But uh, this is I can zip it up if you want. You want me to send it to you? I can zip this and say, okay. You do you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The clock one I'm interested in.
Okay, yeah, I'll send it to you. I could put on the meetup poster. So that's part two. I'm gonna get into the last part is Three.JS. Uh, one thing I liked about Three.JS is that the syntax looks like JavaScript. It, it's not that confusing. I would say it's like you can learn like 80% of it in a day, and then it would take like 6 months to learn the last 20%, and which is common with like a lot of frameworks and stuff, right? So this is the most basic thing they created was um, it's just a cube that uh, rotates. And for any kind of Three.js environment, you have to have a scene, you have to have a camera, and you have to have a renderer. And anytime you make a change that affects the screen, you have to call this function called render, the renderer, this guy. But everything else looks like JavaScript. Like I wrapped all these initialization into a function called init, but that's not part of Three.js. I just find it more convenient that way. And the only thing I find that it's a little bit confusing or a little awkward is this is how it does animation. Um, it calls itself using this command, request animation frame, which does like every 15 frames per second. So I'm just using a regular geometric shape, and I colored it. But I could take the same cube and just add a texture. And this wood is something I just Googled. I was like, find me a wood texture, came up with a box, and I just applied it, and it works fine. Yeah, so this is just a JPEG. And instead of coloring it, which is up here, I'm just creating a material that just maps it to the box itself. Yeah, on the code pen, it wouldn't allow me to present a path to the image. But the UV, I didn't. Yeah, that's all. And there's a setting too that this setting, I don't know why anyone would make it false, but if you set it to false, the edges become a little jagged. So come on. This is when I was 25, I owned this car. It was a green one. I love that car. It was just so I grabbed this model from um, from this guy's Sketchfab. He just offered it for free. Doesn't render as well on the so you anything you create with there's a bunch of free like 3D rendering things that you could down. I'm surprised how like I remember the first time I had like a pirated copy of 3D Studio, like it was like 5 grand, and now all that stuff is free basically. You can make any kind of model and import it. When you import these models, you need to have a second library. It's called so if you load in a 3D model, you have to get the second library called GLTF loader. And what really sucks is that there's different versions of these loaders, and they don't all work with the same uh, the Three.JS version. So you have to match them up perfectly, or it won't work. And the last thing is, so in the beginning, I told you that anything with 3D is cool, but it just kind of it changes all the time. So this WebGL is going away. It's being replaced by this Web GPU. Uh, it's not complete or anything like that, but I think Chrome uses GPU now. That's it. Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah.
Can you explain a little more about the loader, the WebGL or the GLTF loader? Like how do you figure out which one to use?
I actually went and tried a bunch of them before figuring out which one works. But like I'm not, to be honest, I'm not the expert on that. Um, yeah, I would just say like just try a bunch of them and yeah.
Does it depend on the model, like the file format of the model?
No, it depends on the version of Three.JS. Anything else? I'll show a picture of my Carmen Gia.
Oh, that's important. So of all the things that you explored and the title being stuff you might not want to use,
Yeah.
is there any stuff that you found or learned that you're like, no, this is very useful and I want to use it, and it gets around some accessibility issues?
No, the thing I'd say is like the Three.JS stuff, like it's easy and hard. Like it's hard to wrap your head around it, but once you figure it out, it's like, oh, that's not hard at all. It's hard to wrap your head around the concept first, but after you do it, and then you can open up your mind to like all kinds of different kinds of like hover effects and cool things that you probably don't need to do. This was my Carmen Gia. I missed this car.
So we're trying to stay with CSS as long as possible before bringing 3JS. And I wonder if there is a story when the CSS did the thing, but then at some point you eventually have to bring it, and that made value for you.
I think they're not like one or the other. I think they're used for different different use cases. Whenever you use Three.js, it's creating a canvas on the screen, and so you can't actually apply like CSS inside the canvas directly. So that kind of limits you to what you want to do for like a regular HTML page.
So on your page app, you actually use a lot 3JS,
I'm sorry?
3D. I mean, not for your personal pet projects, but on a like I usually like with a fintech, right? Reads details, the too much functionality, right? And if you have time, you can bring something like that. But then are you talking that user experience? I heard it before. I brought it something like that, and it was like, "Oh, distasteful. Don't do that." Right?
Yeah.
Some you got comments like that. So yeah, like yeah, and again on your paid projects,
Right.
right? Did it actually help you, or it's just fun, cool stuff to
Yeah,
experiment on?
to be honest, I've never actually used Three.js in an actual project I'm getting paid for. Like, it's just a fun factor. If you guys use React, there's a package called Fiber, and then Fiber brings in all the Three.js functionalities into components that you can use. But all the loaders, yeah,
Everything within your canvas and talk about it. It's really, really cool.
What about performance? Is it, I don't really know how the CSS is, what would be a bigger performance hog, doing something like what you were doing with maybe the cards or something like that. You could do that in JavaScript as well. So which technique would be more performant?
So CSS it's a lot more. In most use cases, CSS, especially with Chrome, just it's a lot more performant than with JavaScript. You would have to have a much different state and repeat it, and just to get that smooth is much harder. Mhm.
Yeah, that's in JavaScript or in SVG, but all of a sudden you realize this needs to be in Canvas. Like if you have many elements, all of a sudden the DOM gets in your way. And so I think 99% of the time, yeah, CSS, but if you're building something that has hundreds or thousands of moving elements, like you don't want to be in the DOM.
I think, like you said, with the more complex stuff, your ability with CSS, you would eventually start getting really.
Yeah, like that dude's site with the car.
Yeah, that
You
would
can
be-
understand CSS. I mean, you probably could, but why? Why bother?
Yeah.
Get like a massive industry.
It goes all jQuery animation.
It's so much jQuery animation. I'm a master at that.
That was all JS, at least for a while.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get to talk about
That
that.
was so slow.
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Yeah, you missed it. There was no good to it.
What about using like the DOM and Canvas together?
Oh, yeah, there's room for that. Sorry.
Sorry.
Fine.
I know back in the day, I don't know if anyone, well, you said you did Flash. Okay, so back in the day, one thing that I was very fond of when I didn't want to do like full on Flash layout, when we would do like table-based layout with invisible, GIFs, when I would use fireworks to slice things up, I would slice it up in such a way that I took a component or an image of it, and I was going to replace that with Flash. And so I already knew the dimensions of it and what it needs to look like when you land on it. And then you would just have like some cool little animation off to the side, this little whimsical kind of thing that people could like, wow, how do you do that? And really, you just sliced in a tiny Flash thing and stuck it in there. So there is definitely a place for Canvas and
Like grid. It's one of his CSS grid.
stick canvases in there, a bunch of them. Yeah, right on. Well, they do that with a lot of like canvas-based gaming. We'll do one canvas on top of another one, and because one of them doesn't need to update often, so it's like the score or the instructions or something.
So you can layer.
Yeah. For the SVG on top of the canvas, inside of a grid,
Make it responsive.
make it responsive. And Sonny can spin it for you. Cool, well, thank you, Sonny.
It's great. Thanks, American Eagle.